A pleasure to be here with Sudeshna Mohanty. Ma'am, welcome to the Kolkata Literature Festival. You're here to launch Gopinath Mohanty's book, which you have co-translated, called Oblivion and Other Stories. You'll also have a session to talk about that work. So what are you looking forward to speaking in the session? What are the aspects of the conversation you're going to raise?
Yeah, so this session is called Storied Lives, and there's a subtitle also which says that it's stories which transcend languages. So we are going to focus on the timelessness of the themes that Gopinath Mohanty has dealt with. These stories were written over a period of 50 years. So some of them are written, say, more than 41, 55. But those are the themes that he has dealt with, are themes that anybody even today can identify with. So that's going to be the thrust of today's session, the story element, yeah.
So could you shed a bit of light about those themes and what are the ones that perhaps resonate the most in this collection?
There are a lot of stories we could talk about. There's a story about a philandering Babu, which we could relate even today. That story was written way back in 1956. There's a story about a young boy who's going out to join in his first job, and the kind of top of the world feeling that he's experiencing, and that anybody can relate to today. So number of he talks about the poor, the poverty, the rich poor divide, which is even relevant even today, and all these stories were written so many years ago. So yeah, there are many, each story is different, each story is something that we can relate to today.
So these stories were originally written in Odia and now they've been translated into English.
Yes.
So what were the challenges of translating? I mean, of course, a lot of these things do get lost in translation. There's also an aspect of transcreation when it comes to fiction. But what did you personally feel were the biggest challenges during the translation process?
Yeah, for Gopinath Mohanty's language is very colloquial. His language is very lyrical. The biggest challenge for us was to transcreate, and like you say, we've done a little bit of transcreation, and we have. Not focused on a word by word translation, but we've tried to get the sense right, and we've passed around the story. A lot of people have read it, and they say that it's a reasonably good work. So we have to draw on that. So. So we've had to deal with certain untranslatable words, like say a word like Abhiman, for instance, which is very Indian, doesn't easily translate into a European language. So in those instances, we have depended on what I would call a translator's intuition to get the right English word. Yeah. So
And also sometimes it's upon the reader to actually intuit those meanings,
yes,
right?
yes.
And not exactly rely on an accurate translation. So if we look at Gopinath Mohanty's place in Odia literature, he is perhaps the greatest novelist to come out of Odia literature in the last 50, 60, 70 years. But how much of his legacy do you think will be refurbished given that now this is going to be translated into English? He's going to get access to a completely new readership. What do you make of how his legacy will be altered or impacted as a result of this book?
Uh, I see these days, even though it's a sad fact, OTT is replacing literature, novel reading. Gopinath Mohanty's long fiction, a lot of his stories have been translated in English. Short stories haven't been dealt with. In fact, the other day I was speaking to somebody who said, really, has he written so many short stories? When his image as a short story writer has not been projected. So out of the 150 short stories that he wrote, only about 15 stories have been translated and retranslated. So the focus of this book is that all the 20 stories that we have taken are stories that are written, that are being translated for the first time. And because short story as a genre is gaining popularity now, we hope that these stories will go down well with the audience. Yes.
My final question is, as someone who was related to Gopinath Mohanty, what was he like as a person? Did you get to know him personally? What stood out for him as a person, given that most of us know what stood out about him as a writer?
Is the what about with one word, if I could describe his personality: very down to earth, very humble, and very connected with the downtrodden and the poor. So that could be his defining trait. That's why he gelled so well with the tribals that he was working with at the beginning of his career. So yeah, humble person, very down to earth person, and who was very affected by the downtrodden and their problems. So
Thank you so much, ma'am. Have a great time at KLF.
thank you.